A gorgeous young woman stood in front of a huge mirror and critically examined herself. Her figure was perfect. Not a single wrinkle, not even a mimic wrinkle, on her white face. Thanks to modern cosmetology. A thick mass of blonde hair flowed carelessly over her open shoulders. And only women know that the price of this carelessness is a long time of careful styling in an expensive beauty salon. The dress opens the shoulders and accentuates the breasts. Everything is perfect. "I am perfect," Tiffany whispered to herself, and after twirling in front of the mirror, she hurried to join her guests in the spacious, modern living room. She turned 30 today, and a smile played across her lips, accentuating the whiteness of her teeth. Nothing about this gorgeous woman could betray her inner dissatisfaction. And Tiffany was unhappy. And how dissatisfied she was. Her husband Joseph decided not to waste time organizing a party and celebrated her birthday at home. It was unheard of. It's a milestone, and she has to celebrate it at home. Joseph had been more careful in the past. They celebrated Tiffany's birthdays in Paris, then in London, and then, as a last option, at a fancy restaurant. It was a wake-up call, an alarming wake-up call. Her husband was bored again. Tiffany walked out to the guests, dazzling everyone with her smile. She caught the admiring glances of the men and the envious glances of the women. She walked to the head of the table and sat down beside her husband. At the same time, she glanced at the women's outfits and noted that she had seen one of them in this dress before. It was true what they said about their family's finances being tight. Tiffany had been like that herself once. What was there to say? Much worse. She might have tried to save up and buy nice things, but she wore them out to the point of being unattractive. And shamefully, she sometimes even mended them. Tiffany's grandfather was very rich, but his son did not inherit his father's fortune and quickly spent his inheritance. Tiffany, who did not need anything during her childhood, was faced with a choice at the age of 20, to marry for love or to look for a party of convenience. She chose love. A handsome and cheerful fellow student turned her head. Her mother had already warned Tiffany that nothing good would come of this marriage. But Tiffany threw herself into the relationship. She married, and then the routine began. The girl did not want to deny herself anything. The scandals began because of the lack of money, and she almost always lacked it. At the age of 23, the girl realized that none of this was for her. Love is an empty sound when you have to sew a blouse for the weekend. The girl got divorced and somehow grew up, became wiser. Now she knew exactly what she wanted out of life. She had been searching for 2 years. She didn't look at her age, her looks, only at her wallet. The richer the candidate, the better. That's when Joseph caught her eye. The man was 17 years older and ran a large business. The fact that he was married did not embarrass Tiffany. Neither was the fact that he had 2 children. And why should she be ashamed? After all, Joseph married a second time, and the second wife stole a man from the family in the same way. She hurried, had children, and relaxed. And you can't relax? On Joseph's horizon appeared Tiffany, a young, beautiful predator. The girl thought she was one, even though she pretended to be a soft, fluffy bunny. The bunny was so homesick when Josie left him for long periods of time. The rabbit cried alone in the empty, cold bed. Josie mellowed and divorced his second wife. His and Tiffany's marriage had lasted 5 years, and the woman was always cautious. For the first 3 years, everything was perfect. Joseph came home thrilled. He spoiled Tiffany, took her on trips abroad. He couldn't get enough of her. But Tiffany did not relax. She was not the first wife, and she knew how easy it was to change status from married to abandoned. She wasn't the first wife, but she would be the last. And for that, one must be wise. After 3 years, the woman noticed that Josie's eyes had grown dull, that he was lingering outside the house, and that he was interested in the young maid. Tiffany realized how this could end and decided to take the initiative. The young maid's name was Rosa. Rosa was young and very seductive. She also noticed her master's gaze, and was not about to refuse him. Tiffany pinned her against the wall. "What, are you going to seduce my husband?" she asked her once when Rosa was on her way home. The girl pretended to be terribly embarrassed, but her running eyes gave her away. "What makes you think that, Mrs. Tiffany? What makes you think that? How could you think so badly of me?" "Don't pretend. I see everything. I notice everything. I have to tell you, you can't take my husband away from me. I won't let my husband out of my hands. I can send you away right now with a terrible reference. That won't get you a job in any good house." "Why, Mrs. Tiffany?" Rose almost cried out. "I haven't done anything yet. But I want you to. You'll be with my husband, but only the way I want." Rosa was stunned. The maid hadn't expected such a proposal. "What do you mean, under your supervision? Will you have a look? I really need it." Tiffany snorted. "I'll pay you to change Joseph's life. I'll pay you, and you'll report to me. Where you met, what he told you. I'm telling you right now, don't make any plans. The time will come and you'll disappear. Whatever my husband gives you in the meantime, you can consider it a bonus. But don't get cocky." Rosa didn't think twice. She was being offered a cash infusion from 2 sources at once for something she was already planning to do. She thought she'd have a little affair with the rich owner. The girl didn't expect much more. Sometimes she thought getting pregnant would be a good idea. Rose thought it was strange that the owner would look at her with such a wife. The girl agreed without hesitation. To be on the safe side, Tiffany made a recording on her cell phone of Rosa saying that she was only with Joseph because of his money. Tiffany made the recording and waved the phone in Rosa's face in satisfaction. "Remember, you're under my thumb. You will do exactly as I say, and disappear when the time is right." The next day, Rosa began to seduce her master, making eyes at him. Tiffany decided not to interfere and went to see her mother. The process began. His wife's plan worked. Joseph was immediately cheered up. Feeling guilty in front of his wife, he acted like he used to, or almost like he used to. Those feelings were gone. There was only a comfortable, beautiful wife who was not ashamed to show it to people, and who organized the household. But today is Tiffany's 30th birthday, and her husband decided to celebrate it at home. This was a very bad sign. We have to do something about it. Tiffany's birthday party at home also went overboard. Somewhere in the middle of the party, a famous singer came into the living room, sang his best love song, and kissed Tiffany's hand. And it still wasn't the same. Tiffany could feel in her skin how much her husband missed sitting next to her. The way he looked at some of the female guests in particularly revealing dresses. Josie needed a new toy immediately. And if Tiffany didn't step up, he'd find one for himself. And then there's no telling where he'll end up. Some sneaky young thing will come along and put Tiffany out of business. She was terrified of such a development, so the day after her birthday, she went to a modeling agency. Generously paying the manager, she asked him to bring her a portfolio of the most beautiful girls. She needed a girl to make Josie bite. The agency was surprised, but showed no surprise. Any whim for your money, as they say. Tiffany looked at the photos for a long time, meticulously. When she opened one portfolio, she knew immediately this was her. The one she wanted. A young and, from the looks of it, very simple girl was looking at her from the photo. The look in her big blue eyes was that of a frightened doe. I want to meet this one. Tiffany pointed at the photo. Are you sure? The receptionist winked at her. You see, this girl is new to us. She's still a little wild. With every word the receptionist said, Tiffany became more convinced that she was right. This was exactly the kind of girl she needed for her purposes. Set us up a meeting. The woman slammed the folder shut. And so, just half an hour later, the girl from the photo was sitting in front of her. Sitting there, her blue eyes fluttering incomprehensibly. At first she was happy, thinking that she had been noticed and offered modeling work. But when she realized that this was not the case, she was completely confused. Excuse me, but I don't understand what you're offering me. I am offering you to meet my husband for money. Tiffany was angry at the young model's incomprehension. I will pay you the money, and your meetings will be controlled by me. Are you seriously suggesting that your husband cheat on you with me? And I'll have to have sex. The young blue-eyed girl named Dorothy was shocked. Too embarrassed to even finish the sentence, she was extremely indignant. I wanted to work as a model, and what you offer me you call something else. That's not who I am. Dorothy jumped up from the couch to leave the room quickly. Tiffany, meanwhile, placed a piece of paper on the glass table and wrote down a sum of money. With a grin, she held it out to Dorothy. What is this? I'll pay you for it. Not all at once, of course. I'll give it to you in installments. And take into account all the gifts my husband is going to give you. And he's a very generous man. Dorothy froze. The easiest thing to do now was to run away in a huff and then regret the lost money. Of course, the young model needed money, like everyone else. Dorothy dreamed of a good education. Education cost a lot of money, which Dorothy didn't have. She looked at the piece of paper with the amount on it, then looked at Mrs. Tiffany, then back at the paper. Tiffany realized that the silly blue-eyed fool was in her pocket. That evening at dinner, Tiffany asked her husband, Josie, have you found a secretary, or are you still looking? I'm not just asking. I went to my mother's house today, and she knows someone. Her daughter is looking for a job. They say she needs one. Maybe you'd consider her for the job. Unclear friend, unclear daughter. Does she have a degree? I want serious women with resumes. Oh, Josie, Tiffany smiled. What's so hard about being a secretary? You know, just going through paperwork and bringing you coffee. I don't know much about her myself, but my mom says she's a good girl. Talk to her, please. They asked me to. Okay. Have her come by my office tomorrow. I'll talk to her. If the girl is really stupid, I'll say no. When Dorothy walked into Joseph's office, the man didn't care if she was stupid or not. The first time he saw her, Joseph knew he was going to hire her. She's a pleasure to look at, Joseph thought. Besides, for all her beauty, the girl looked so innocent. Joseph hadn't met a girl like that in a long time. And Dorothy felt terribly embarrassed. Such a solid, grown-up man. Very mature. And looking at her like that, she wanted to pull down her skirt. It's uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. Dorothy, isn't it? Joseph asked. Why don't you and I talk business somewhere in the restaurant? I haven't had lunch yet today. How would you like that? Dorothy could only agree. Soft music played in the restaurant, and Joseph's gaze grew more open. That's an unpleasant look, Dorothy thought. She told herself to treat it all like a job. But how disgusting it made her feel. Dorothy! Joseph put his hand on the girl's palm. You have absolutely no experience, but I'll take you. The girl let go of his hand and clutched the glass of wine, which she found very bitter. The man noticed that her fingers twitched. She was worried. That turned Joseph on even more. She really is so unsophisticated. The man decided to treat her very carefully, so as not to scare her away. For several days, he took Dorothy to restaurants, drove her around in a car, and when he decided the apple was ripe, he took her to the hotel. Dorothy even went up to the room with him, but when it came down to it, she couldn't. I'm sorry, this is all wrong. I can't do this. She pushed the man away. Your wife hired me. What? What do you mean hired? I know it was my wife who recommended you. No, she didn't. She asked me to go out with you and promised to pay me. She even paid me once. But I'll pay you back, because I can't do that. It's dirty, it's low. When Joseph came home that day, he behaved as usual. Except he made an unusual request of his wife. Tiffany, I'm having a little financial difficulty. That's all right, but I need all the money I can get. I know you've been saving. Put it all into this account right here. Everything you have. I'll pay you back double in a month. It didn't even occur to Tiffany to suspect anything. Of course she had savings. The woman had built up a financial cushion in case of divorce. But Joseph said he'd pay her back double. And that's an impressive amount of money. Tiffany gave everything to her husband without thinking that she was not putting the money in his name, but in the account of his company. It was only later, when her husband told her about the divorce, that she realized everything. If the first 2 times Joseph divorced, he fully secured the future of his wives and children, he left Tiffany with nothing after the divorce. Nothing at all, in spite of her tears. These tears were of powerlessness and anger. Tiffany cursed her husband, cursed herself, unable to comprehend how she had allowed herself to be so deceived. After a while, When her emotions stopped running wild, the woman was able to pull herself together. She had a purpose again. She was still young, damn good looking, and there were so many rich men around. It was a shame to have to start all over again. This time you have to choose a man who is even older. Someone who wouldn't have time to divorce her.